All right, everyone. Hello, all participants from all over the world. I am Dr. 𝗪𝗡𝗢𝗡𝗓, today's webinar share. Welcome all of you to the webinar series on Beyond Monolingual Lens in a Globalizing World, Theory, Practice, and Research, organized by English Language Department, Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences, Khon University, Thailand. Before we start the session, I would like to express my deep sense of gratitude and thanks to all people who for their hard work to make this event possible. For your information, this session will be recorded until the end of the talk, but a Q&A session will not be recorded. Within a 1 week time, we will distribute presentation materials, a recorded video, e-certificates, and evaluation forms to you to give us feedback. So please expect to receive an email in due course. Right, in this session, I would like you to meet 𝗪𝗡𝗡𝗦𝗪𝗡𝗏, your host and moderator today. 𝗪𝗡𝗡𝗏, it is over to you now.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Banchakan, for your organizing the events and your kind introductions. And once again, hello participants all over the world. And here I am, 𝗪𝗡𝗡𝗦𝗪𝗡𝗏, teacher at Khon University. Thank you very much for your participation in today's webinar. Next, before we are going to listen to our keynote speaker, Dr. Kristof Savski, let me invite Assistant Professor Dr. 𝗧𝗵𝗂𝗏𝗡𝗚𝗧, the chair of the English Language Department, Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences, Khon University, to welcome you to today's webinars. Okay, please.
Hello, everyone. This is 𝗧𝗵𝗂𝗏𝗡𝗏, the department head of English Language Department, and I'd like to welcome you all to our webinar series. This is the second webinar on the topic globalization and ideology of English in Thailand. So I'd like to actually thank you, Dr. Kristof, for being our guest speaker. And I'm sure that you are going to learn a lot from him, and please enjoy the fruitful workshop, or let's say webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. 𝗪𝗡𝗡𝗏𝗡𝗏, very much for your kind welcoming speech. And next, without further ado, allow me to present our keynote speaker, Dr. Kristof Savski. He's currently an Assistant Professor of Linguistics at the Faculty of Liberal Arts, Prince of Songkla University in Hat Yai, Thailand. He received his master's degree and PhD from Lancaster University in the UK. And I believe that today's session will be very, very interesting for us as teachers, graduate students, and those who are interested in topic to hear him discuss about globalization and ideologies of English in Thailand today. His current research lies on sociolinguistics, applied linguistics, critical discourse studies, and language policies in order to examine the globalization of language standards such as CEFR, as well as other phenomena like the transnational migration of teachers of English. His work has been published in, for example, language policy, TESOL quarterly, and ELT journal. If you have any questions or anything related to the topic, please feel free to associate with our keynote speaker at the end of the talk. Next, please unmute your microphone and enjoy the talk. Dr. Kristof, the stage is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, 𝗪𝗡𝗡𝗦𝗪𝗡𝗏 and 𝗪𝗡𝗏𝗂𝗏𝗏 and Banchakan for inviting me to give this talk. It's really, really nice to be here with you, yeah, and really great pleasure to see a big audience with a couple of familiar names and a lot of new names that I'm really glad to meet, yeah. Okay, let me share my slides here before I forget. Okay, this is going to take a second. Okay, so yeah, so when I saw the when I was invited to give this talk, I kind of was thinking, you know, what do I have to say about going beyond monolingual lens? And trying to think of, you know, looking toward kind of new models of language education. Yeah, and really, this is something that a lot of my work has kind of touched on. Yeah, but really, sort of the core of my work is sort of looking at belief systems, looking at ideologies. Yeah, Ajahn Anon mentioned that one of my kind of the fields that I'm sort of that I'm connected to is critical discourse studies, which, if you know, sort of deals with questions of ideology. Yeah, and I also draw on those parts of sociolinguistics which write about ideology. So I think I thought that would be an interesting thing to consider. And of course, I've been in Thailand here for 6 years now, working on sort of different things. So basically today, yeah, I'll kind of bring together a couple of themes that I've written about, yeah, and hopefully give you some starting points to think about, yeah. So I'll start with globalization as a kind of like, you know, the biggest picture of what is going on in the world around us now. You know, what is kind of our world all about. I think globalization is kind of like a good starting point in that sense, yeah. And from that's going to lead me to talk about also new trends in sociolinguistics and also applied linguistics, especially things like global Englishes and translanguaging, yeah. And here I'm going to talk about how these provide basically a challenge to establish theories and practices that are especially around English language teaching. And I'm then going to look at two sort of areas of, like, can call them sites of struggle, or we can call them areas of conflict, or areas where we have kind of different ideas, different ideologies in conflict around English in Thailand. Yeah, and I'll focus on language policy as one of the sort of things that I deal with the most, looking at here how when global and local interests are in language policy come in contact, what kind of ideologies become visible. And I'll talk about teacher recruitment. So who gets to be a teacher, right? And see here a clash between kind of conventional and also new models of you know, who is a teacher, right? So hopefully I'm going to try to kind of keep the practical sort of side of ideology always visible. Yeah, ideology sounds like a big kind of term, but it you know, somewhere out there in the sky. Yeah, but it is something that has very real effects on all of our lives. Yeah, so I'll try to kind of hopefully keep that real effect of ideology also in mind for us. Okay, so how can we define globalization? Yeah, very kind of influential definition coming from 𝗪𝗲𝗫 way back in 1990. Yeah, is basically to just say that it's intensive and continuous exchange, of people, knowledge, products, and services and resources. Yeah, so all kind of things, yeah, being exchanged, moving across some kind of traditional borders, yeah, across some kind of let's say borders that we sort of maybe traditionally saw as, you know, unmovable, as impenetrable almost. Yeah. Now, often I think globalization, people sort of imagine it is, okay, it means that it's development of like one global culture. Yeah, that all of our differences kind of melt down and we basically all kind of start to become the same. Now, this might be true to some small extent, but really this is only a small part of the story. Yeah, really globalization is more like continuous contact between different cultures. Yeah, where the differences between cultures kind of so continue to be maintained, but the cultures themselves start to change and go and influence each other and go into different directions. Yeah, that is kind of the way to see as a kind of new type of evolution of culture. Yeah. And here, you know, with globalization, we've got to think about kind of everyday stuff, yeah? Everyday things that we do, practices that we participate in, which are somehow moving us across the borders of cultures, yeah? Think about, for example, you know, all the things that we do on social media these days, yeah? You know, we can participate in all kind of discussions, yeah? We can, for example, get into football in the UK, right? We choose the team we support, we like all the pages on Facebook, right? We start to read and then respond to the comments, right? And we are part of that community in some way. We are part of that culture, right? But we aren't there, we're here, you know? But that is something that globalization is sort of making it possible for us to do, yeah? Same thing, you know, we participate more and more in certain kind of cultural activities that are, we could say, global, yeah? Drinking coffee in particular kinds of ways is one of these, yeah? I see more and more people going, for example, to, you know, hang out for long periods of time in coffee shops, yeah? Even bring their computer and work at the coffee shop, things like that, yeah? These are all sort of things where we are in some way also participating in a kind of global culture, right? We're sort of exchanging, sharing these practices with people all around the world, yeah? Important thing always is that even though we share these things with others, yeah, globalization is also the fact that we, from each of our perspectives, do these things slightly differently, yeah? So the way that we might do coffee drinking in Thailand would probably be quite different from the way that is done in other places, even though, you know, on the surface it might seem the same, yeah? But in the end, there is a kind of transformation that happens, yeah? There is a cultural change that happens as part of globalization, right? So the practice of drinking coffee at a coffee shop, yeah, is different here than it would be elsewhere, yeah? Just like, you know, when Thai culture becomes globalized, yeah, when Thai food travels to other contexts, right, that food would change, the meaning would change, and also just practically, right, what the food looks like would be different, yeah? And this is very much important in globalization, yeah, that it's a change, not just, you know, one big culture kind of coming out of everything. So here, if we're talking now, this term new normal is kind of very much in fashion, yeah? Here, if we're thinking about globalization, it means that these transnational flows of culture, right? So this exchange of different aspects of culture are kind of like a new normal, yeah? Now, a key reason why this has happened, of course, yeah, is a very practical thing. So the development of technologies that allow for this kind of thing to happen, right? If you happen to, you know, be able to see, for example, I don't know, flight schedules from 20, 30 years ago, yeah, you will see that the options that we have now, the possibilities that we have now, each of us to travel from where we are to another place have changed incredibly, yeah? Just access to what we can do, and also access to things like Amazon and Lazada and all of these kind of things that allow us to get items from other places as well. So this has all kind of, you know, has kind of really changed things, yeah? And of course, the media has also made a big change and a big difference for globalization. It's allowed a lot more movement in a cultural sense, yeah? And here, I think an interesting comparison, right? Now, we might get a sense that during COVID-19, during the pandemic, right, we kind of, this kind of thing is sort of interrupted, right? We get a kind of, we get these temporary limits on physical movement, yeah? But on the other hand, you could probably say that the cultural flows, yeah, through social media in particular, were even more intense during this time, yeah? We did even more of this intercultural participation, right? I mean, it started off already, we were all sort of obsessing about COVID, you know, from day one, when, you know, it started to appear in Wuhan, right? We all start to follow, and then, oh my God, and we track, you know, the number of cases as it's slowly kind of growing and then changing and everything, yeah? So in some way, right, that aspect of globalization became even more intense during this time. Yeah. So really, this is kind of really, it is a new normal. This is the real new normal in some way. Yeah. So here, of course, again, I should say, yeah, as these kind of movements of culture, yeah, these global cultural flows, as Pennycook talked about, yeah, as they happen, as we cross the borders of traditional cultures, yeah, or traditional borders of cultures, right, we have process of change, yeah. The things that get transferred get changed in line with how they get transferred. Yeah, Pennycook very long time ago, in 2006, almost 20 years ago now, yeah, was talking about, for example, how hip hop, as it travels from one culture to the other, one place to the other, and sort of gets sort of reappropriated, reinterpreted by new by a new audience, by new performers, right? How it really changes. Yeah. This is really kind of a very important thing to always keep in mind with globalization. Yeah? Now, what are the implications of this? Yeah, well, the key sort of implication is kind of is basically just in broad sense a challenge to traditional borders. Yeah, borders of kind of, you know, countries, right? Political borders, economic borders, but especially borders of culture. Yeah. So the traditional view of culture was in some way kind of as like a closed set, right? So we said, okay, Thai culture are these things, right? That are kind of common to Thai people, right? You know, I'm from Slovenia, so Slovenian culture would be, you know, these things, right? And we'll kind of see it as like something that, you know, we can almost draw like a line around, yeah? You know, certain kind of things that we do, certain kind of way of thinking, values, that sort of thing, yeah? In a globalized world, these are the kind of borders that are kind of getting a lot harder to maintain, yeah? You know, we all participate not only in this traditional culture, right? But we engage with many other cultures, yeah? So we sort of naturally, we become more and more intercultural, transcultural in some way, yeah? So this has implications for a lot of things, right? Including language. Yeah. As we engage with different cultures, very natural that our repertoire, our cultural, but also our linguistic repertoire. Yeah. So what we kind of know, right? And what we do, so our practices, they are transformed. Yeah. They are diversified. They become more and more diverse. So we become kind of, you know, we acquire sort of different aspects of language, different aspects of culture, right? And this, I think, this sort of poses quite big questions for linguists in general. Yeah, you know, language and culture, these are really closely connected, right? Language in general is in some way a medium of globalization, right? So language is one of these things that that carries all of these global flows, right? It's maybe the main thing that carries these global cultural flows, yeah? But then the question is, well, how does globalization affect language, yeah? Or how does it affect languages? So one question that we sort of got to ask, yeah, is, do these conventional assumptions that there are, yeah, around the world about the connection between a particular language and a particular culture, do these assumptions still make sense? So for example, assuming that, okay, we have Thai language and Thai culture, right? That these two are kind of, you know, closely connected, right? And we have English, yeah, and we have English speaking culture, right? And that these are kind of so closely connected. These are really this is really a big question, yeah? Probably the answer is that no, right? We have to kind of also change our way of thinking about this connection, yeah? We also kind of have to ask, you know, if we're questioning the traditional borders of cultures, right? Questioning, you know, what is Thai culture, what is British or American or Slovenian or German or Malaysian culture, right? Shouldn't we also question then the border of the language, borders of languages, yeah? So shouldn't we also ask, you know, are the borders of, you know, should we see the borders of Thai as almost geographic and kind of very separate from other languages, right? Or should we try to find a way of conceptualizing languages which is also a little bit more sort of in line with globalization? Yeah, these are sort of big questions, and I'm just going to kind of point out two areas of work in applied linguistics and sociolinguistics that have tried to answer these questions. Okay, so one of the areas, big areas of work that I think will be very familiar to many people in Thailand, yeah, is the diversification of Englishes that we've seen. So the study of sort of view of English as a language which has multiple forms, yeah, so multiple Englishes. Now, obviously, here the emergence of English as a global language, yeah, is not something that is just the result of globalization. It goes actually much further back, including in what we would traditionally call expanding circle countries like Thailand. Yeah, the history of contact with English is actually quite long. But we can definitely say that the spread of English has intensified very much over recent decades. English is becoming a lot more global, a lot faster in recent sort of couple of decades. Yeah, and globalization definitely seems to be playing a big part of that. Yeah. So the key implication here seems to be that the number of English speakers is growing very fast, as with globalization, right? These speakers are in different contexts, right? They're using English in different ways for different purposes, right? So the key implication here is a pluralization of norms, right? So we can't talk about one English being appropriate or correct or the right one. Yeah, we're sort of seeing the development of many more different norms. Yeah, so these assumptions that were sort of out there once, that are still out there to some extent, yeah, that there is one English with one kind of standard, yeah, are really kind of very difficult to uphold. Yeah, so here there is this nice term, English as a pluralithic language. Yeah, so a language of kind of multiple sort of shapes and forms. Yeah. And sort of the field that has recently done a lot of work on this is sort of, you refer to now as global Englishes. Yeah. And here really we have kind of a lot of different concepts and frameworks that have tried to make sense of the dynamics of English as a global language. Yeah, and I'm sort of using global Englishes here as an umbrella term, following how Galloway and Rose, who are sort of two very noted scholars in this area, are using this term. So encompassing a lot of different kind of traditions. Okay, one tradition here is the one that has existed for a very long time now. Yeah, which is world Englishes. Yeah. Which really focuses on sort of the distinctiveness of English or Englishes used in various contexts. Yeah, so this is going back to 𝗪𝗪𝗕𝗓 in the 1980s. Yeah, the field that has really looked at, that really started off us looking at the sort of plurality of global Englishes, right? Started getting us away from this idea of one English. Yeah, which is, let's say, I would kind of describe it mainly as a kind of sociolinguistic perspective. Yeah. On the other side, then, or something kind of slightly different from this, we have the very big body of work that's looked at the use of English in intercultural communication. Yeah. So here we have work on English as a lingua franca and also English as an international language. Yeah. I really have to say here, yeah, global Englishes sort of is trying to cover both of these sort of traditions, or all of these traditions, but they are quite distinct. Yeah, you will find different scholars who identify with one of these kind of labels, right? Who will say, I do world Englishes, I don't do English as a lingua franca. Yeah, you will find different journals, yeah, under different names, where people published. There is a journal called World Englishes. There is a journal about English as a lingua franca, yeah? And there are also different conferences. So just not to say that I am kind of saying that all of these are one and the same, yeah? But let's say I'm just sort of suggesting that there is a kind of way of seeing this as kind of connected in some way. Basically, what connects them, I think, yeah, is the fact that they are bringing us or trying to push us to shift away from a static native speaker norm in English, yeah, from a static norm of any kind, from this idea of just one English, right, same for everyone, right, and sort of acknowledging sort of a natural diversity of Englishes in different contexts, okay? And here, all of this work has kind of tended to focus on sort of the geographic aspect of this diversity, right? So the fact that, in different places, right, different people will use English differently, right? But of course, there's also a functional aspect to this, right? The fact that depending on what we're doing with English, right, the norms are going to be very different, yeah? So if we're doing academic writing, the set of norms that we follow, right, are very, very different from if we are, doing a kind of business negotiation, yeah? It's not, this is another kind of aspect of this, yeah? It's not just about the place where we are, but also the type of activity that we're engaging in, right? This is also really an aspect of saying that, okay, there are multiple norms, yeah? This is also a very important aspect of this, the functional kind of diversity, yeah? And here, just to kind of spotlight that there is a lot of interesting work going on the connection between global Englishes and language teaching, okay? So one bit of work where I had really small bit of involvement mainly was done by 𝗪𝗢𝗕𝗢𝗢, Ajahn 𝗪𝗢𝗕𝗢𝗢, who is also Ajahn at my department, was looking at, for example, how we can integrate global Englishes into the language classroom and how we can use knowledge from all of these fields to try and raise awareness among learners of these multiple norms, yeah, of the diversity of Englishes, yeah. And this is really like some area where there is a lot of work going on at the moment, a lot of interesting sort of work happening right now. Just another thing to spotlight is work by Ajahn Denchai at Budapest University, who is in the audience, yeah, who is doing the same kind of thing, raising awareness, but he was focusing on teachers, yeah, teachers as the other kind of important part of the equation, right, who often, who also need kind of professional development, yeah, who need kind of stimulation to kind of maybe pay attention to this diversity, right, to sort of also change some of their practices or reevaluate some of their practices, yeah. These are kind of, I think, this is sort of really sort of interesting current work coming out of global Englishes. I think it's sort of very worth having a look at this, yeah. The other thing that we need to sort of ask, right, if we sort of or that is being asked, right, is it appropriate to just talk about Englishes, yeah? So is it just Englishes, or is it Englishes plus that we should really be talking about when we're thinking about the connection between English and globalization, yeah? So now I think the estimates are that there are like, 2 or 2+ billion speakers of English around the world, yeah? Here, obviously, this is a very tricky number to come up with, yeah, because in the end, there are very, very different criteria that you could choose, yeah. But what we can definitely say is if there are 2 billion, right, the vast majority of these people can speak at least one other language aside from English, if not several more, yeah. That is kind of another sort of aspect of global Englishes, is that it's really expansion of already multilingual repertoires in many cases, yeah. So we will find that most speakers of English will at some point mix English with elements of other languages, yeah. We can probably say that with confidence that I think probably all of us here, or at least, vast majority of us here are multilingual speakers of English, right? I'm sure that in our lives, yeah, we will mix English with elements of other languages. Yeah, that is our everyday kind of use of language, everyday kind of creativity. Yeah. Now, this is not a new thing, of course. Yeah, I don't want you to think that I'm saying that this is just happening because of globalization. Yeah, I mean, throughout the development of languages, right, there is continuous contact between languages. Languages are not naturally separate. Yeah. The thing here is, though, society often imagine them in that way, right? Society thinks, okay, so in this place they speak this language, in that place they speak that one, right? And sort of our social idea is that this is the kind of natural state of affairs, yeah? In fact, that is probably something that emerged through social kind of, through kind of human intervention, more than kind of, through nature. Yeah, probably, that is how we structure our reality in some way, right? By setting up, for example, borders of countries, right? And saying, okay, in this country the national language is this one, and in that country the language is that one. Yeah, in reality that's not what happens. Yeah, that is, that is more of a kind of that's more of a sort of social, sort of political sort of issue. Yeah. So here the term that you will see around is there will be people saying that there is a multilingual turn in applied linguistics happening. Yeah. So here we're talking about a kind of re-evaluation of core concepts and values in applied linguistics. Yeah. At the center of this is a kind of normalization of multilingualism. Yeah. So basically, an acknowledgement of, it's normal for us to speak multiple languages, and it's normal for us to mix and connect these languages. Yeah. The sort of most visible concept that you will encounter in this area is translanguaging. Yeah, which many of you probably have heard of. Yeah. So a couple of core ideas around translanguaging is that, okay, people don't store and process different languages separately in their mind, right? We don't have, English over here and then Thai over there and then Slovenian over there. Yeah, that's not how we learn, and that's not how we use language. Yeah, translanguaging would say that we have a unitary linguistic repertoire. Yeah, so we have one kind of collection of all the things that we can do, that we can use to express meaning, right? And we then draw on that, in different ways. Yeah. So in some cases, if we are multilingual, right, we might just use one language. Yeah. For example, just English. Yeah. Like I am doing with you now. Okay. Or in some cases, there might be elements from several languages at the same time. So there might be some English, and there might be some Thai, and there might be some Malay, for example. Yeah. And this is in response to social context, right? So it's in response to where we are, who is around us, what are we communicating about, right? That kind of thing. Yeah. It's not because of constraints imposed by languages themselves. Yeah. It's not that, because languages force us to use just one, yeah, that we kind of use just one. Yeah. And it's also not because of constraints imposed by the mind. Yeah. It's because of social constraints or social consideration. Yeah. The audience, right? The social kind of practices, all kind of different things that we're reacting to. So just to give you a kind of context a little bit here, why are people sort of thinking about this? Okay, these are kind of the godmother and the godfather of translanguaging. Let's say Ophelia Garcia, who is an American, a Cuban-American sociolinguist, and Li Wei, who is a Chinese-British sociolinguist. Yeah. Now they are kind of the two sort of figures most associated with translanguaging as a concept, and I think it's interesting to sort of see why they started to talk about this, because actually I think that tells us a lot about this concept. Now for Ōfelia Garcia, okay, the issue that she sort of is dealing with most of the time, yeah, is the position, or rather we should say the exclusion of Spanish from mainstream education in the USA. Okay, so if you're familiar with the US context, you will know that for a very long time, the sort of educational policy there was defined by a kind of English-only mindset, yeah? So English had to be the only language of teaching and learning, had to be the main language. So the effect of this was a marginalization of Spanish speakers, yeah, of what they would call Hispanics there, yeah, because their bilingualism, right, because they have something which actually, you know, is in addition to English, or in some cases, you know, is a bit asymmetric, so maybe they can speak more Spanish than English, yeah, depending on circumstances, right? Because that bilingualism is devalued, yeah, is treated as abnormal, right? They are basically excluded. Yeah, they are sort of marginalized. They are kind of at the edge. They are treated as, you know, almost like someone with a learning disability, or someone who kind of, you know, needs kind of special assistance to learn, that sort of thing. Yeah. So for Ōfelia Garcia, her sort of understanding of, okay, why is translanguaging and what is translanguaging, yeah, really comes out of this sort of need to advocate for these people, yeah, need to kind of argue their case in some way, yeah. So here translanguaging is seen as a kind of very practical thing, yeah, as using the full linguistic repertoire of a bilingual person for learning, yeah. So saying that, okay, we're going to use English and we're going to use Spanish in the classroom. We're going to make both of those languages of learning, and we're not going to force learners to kind of choose one of them, yeah. That's sort of really kind of the sort of the view of translanguaging that that comes from kind of the US side, yeah. Li Wei, who is sort of the other sort of big figure, yeah, has a quite different sort of different perspective in some way, yeah. So he is more looking at the creativity of multilingual speakers of different languages, yeah. He's sort of more someone who almost arrived a little bit from a global English's perspective, or from a world English's perspective. So he was looking at, for example, Chinglish, yeah, so Chinese English, yeah, which basically he argued that is problematic to say, okay, this is a kind of English, yeah, because it really is a kind of merger in some way of Chinese and English, yeah. So he is sort of problematizing that world English's view, and basically arguing that no, this is multilingual people translanguaging, creating kind of new forms, yeah, which are not here nor there, yeah. They are kind of a new sort of set of resources, yeah. They are not just English, they're not just Chinese, yeah. So he sort of, one of his sort of big thing was talk about translanguaging as a kind of natural instinct, yeah, of each of us, yeah, that we all have this sort of capacity, okay. Why I'm talking about this, not because I'm going to continue with this, but I just think it's kind of important to have this a little bit of insight, yeah, in terms of the context where some of these ideas come from, yeah. Also because I think it sort of tells us that we also, if we work with these kind of concepts, we also have a crucial role in making them fit our context, yeah. We're not just, you know, receiving. Okay, can I ask, just to kind of give us a second here to think, yeah, and collect our thoughts. Does anyone have any kind of short clarification questions? Just to kind of, this is kind of the end of the first part. I just want to kind of see whether any of that was kind of maybe confusing, which can happen, yeah. I might not explain things very well. So anyone want to ask any brief questions? Okay, all right. I'll continue then. Oh, wait, in the chat there's a question. All right. There is not a question, yeah. Anyone? Okay. If you did have anything, yeah, and you you want to ask, I'm gonna stop maybe in another few in another couple of in the next kind of part, yeah. So there will be another chance. So if you don't want to turn on your microphone, yeah, just write it in the chat, yeah, and I'll get to it. Okay. All right. Let me go on then, yeah. So we can kind of summarize, yeah, that this is a kind of time of tension happening, yeah. These are sort of frameworks, global Englishes and translanguages, which are trying to respond to challenges posed by globalization, yeah, by giving alternative ideas, yeah, by giving new ideas. The sort of observation that we can make, though, if we look at from a more practical perspective, yeah, is that there are a lot of things that happen, yeah, in language teaching practice, yeah, which are really very far from what I've just been talking about, yeah. So we can say that, okay, in academia, right, in scholarship, these frameworks have been acquiring more and more visibility, right? In some parts of the field, yeah, they are now dominant, yeah. I mean, translanguaging is now the concept in sociolinguistics, applied linguistics, yeah. Outside academia, especially in some contexts, the impact has been rather limited, yeah. Or the impact is still sort of, we are yet to see it really, yeah. Partly one of the reasons this is that what these frameworks try to do is to challenge certain kind of belief systems, yeah, certain kind of ideologies, yeah. But these ideologies have continued to be dominant, yeah. They've continued to kind of dominate the way that we think about language, yeah. So that is why we have this tension, yeah, new ideas, old ideas, yeah. So, okay, just to kind of go through a little bit of ideology, okay, not that I want to go into theory too far, yeah, but just how do we understand it, okay? Very simply, we can say that an ideology is a system of some kind of related ideas or values, yeah. That is one aspect, and the other thing is that ideologies are shared among some kind of social group, yeah. So we may have our own individual beliefs, right? But ideology, when we talk about that, is something that members of some kind of group share, yeah. It's a kind of, they are beliefs that bring us together, okay? Now, very importantly, right, ideologies typically involve some kind of value judgment, yeah? What is normal, what is abnormal, yeah? What is good, what is bad, what is right, what is wrong, yeah? This is part and parcel, really, of ideology, yeah? So they are ideas or values, they are evaluations in some way, yeah? And why do we have these evaluations? Well, generally, ideology is there to justify some kind of arrangement of power, some kind of power relations, right? Someone has more power, someone has less, yeah? Ideology is there typically to normalize that, yeah? To make it seem as this is how things are, yeah? This is normality, yeah? Now, when we analyze ideologies, yeah, very often we give names to them, yeah? So, for example, ideology that people might talk about quite a bit is nationalism, yeah? That is kind of very typical example of ideology, yeah? Now, this shouldn't imply that ideologies are static, yeah? That, because we say nationalism, right, means that nationalism is a list of like 10 beliefs that are, the same everywhere, yeah? Ideologies vary with context, yeah? They are connected to, different places, right? So nationalism in one place would be different from nationalism in another place. They also change over time, yeah? So we can identify things like, for example, the type of nationalism that Donald Trump kind of activated, yeah? The type of nationalism that he kind of tried to, create, for example, from, before he was trying to become president of the USA to when he was president to now when he seems to be trying to become president once again. Yeah, that is something that is very specific, right? To sort of him and his sort of agenda, his persona, right? The people that he's speaking to, right? All of these, these ideologies are really connected to context. Okay, this is kind of just to say, if we give a name to something, yeah, it might seem that, oh, it's like a packaged kind of set of ideas. It really is something that is just to make analysis easier in some way. Okay. Now, ideologies, belief systems, right? They are part of culture, right? They are part of, if you kind of know theories of culture, under some frameworks we might call this deep culture. Yeah, so it's kind of something that is sort of invisible, yeah, from a kind of everyday perspective. Yeah, they exist, yeah, in the sense that they are reproduced through kind of common sense views, common sense ideas in any particular society, right? So they are accepted as, okay, this is how our society works. Yeah, that's just how it is. Yeah, and they are also reproduced through what we do, through our actions. Yeah, we do culture every day, and we also do ideology every day. Yeah, and I think this is important to keep in mind because all of these kind of big ideologies, right? They are an everyday thing. They are something that happens every day. They are reproduced through our individual actions, and because of that, we can also resist. We can also fight against ideology through our actions, right? We're not just, in the world without any kind of power. We do have some kind of power to change ideology. Yeah? And this is sort of what global Englishes and translanguaging kind of try to do. They try to give us ways that we can resist some of the conventional ideologies around language. Yeah. Obviously, they might through that construct another ideology. Yeah, I think in some ways they do. Yeah, but that is another kind of issue. Yeah, maybe that is unavoidable. Okay, but what I'm leading up to here is sort of making this point that when we analyze ideology, we're analyzing tension. Yeah, we're analyzing struggle. Yeah, fight, debate, confrontation of different ideas, of different systems of ideas. Yeah. And I'm sort of leading here towards what I'm gonna talk about with regards to English in Thailand. Okay. So I'm gonna focus on sort of two sides of ideological tension. Yeah, or two areas where I think there is this kind of struggle happening around English in Thailand. Yeah. I'm going to look at language policy. Okay, so language policy, just if we want to define broadly, right, is like the sort of political decision making about language. Yeah, specifically, I'm going to talk mainly about sort of language education policies. Okay, and here looking at how they are created and implemented. Okay, and here I'm drawing on sort of various bits of research that I've done since 2016. And parts of this, I should acknowledge, were funded by the Thailand Research Fund, which now doesn't exist anymore, but at the time, they generously fund my work. And the other topic that I'm going to look at is teacher recruitment. So how actually, teachers are employed. Yeah. So this is the research that I did here is sort of the tension around recruitment of teachers. I especially focus on online debates in this case, but I will also show you a little bit of data sort of from kind of offline types of data collection as well. Yeah. So so here I'm talking about one sort of primary bit of research that I've been doing since 2019. Which is funded by the Faculty of Liberal Arts, so by the faculty where I work. Okay, just to say here, yeah, that yeah, so I started working on this sort of online topics here. Was very lucky to have done so when COVID hit. Yeah, because it means that I still had access to the data that I needed. Yeah, that is just luck in research in some ways. So just broadly, okay, I'm going to define language policy as a type of sociocultural process, through which we create and enact norms of language use in some kind of organization or community. Okay, this is really just sort of to say that language policy doesn't tend to happen in kind of unstructured environments, right? We tend to have a kind of structure. Very often it's the state, right? So the government kind of creating some kind of policy. In some cases also, it might be other kinds of authority, but the main thing is there's some kind of authority sort of making norms or rules of language. Now, often what we see with policy as well is we have kind of involvement of multiple authorities, right? So we have one authority and another sort of policy traveling from one to the next. So government creates a policy, right? It goes from, let's say, the Ministry of Education to educational regions, right? They make some sort of decisions, they then send it to the schools. People at schools will make some sort of decision, and then it will make its way to the teachers, right? So we have these multiple kind of levels, Now, I said here that policy is a sociocultural process, right? And that what that means is that just like any other cultural thing, is also something that can be globalized. It can be sort of, it can become, it can sort of, cross these boundaries that I talked about before. Couple of examples, sort of globalizing forces in language policy, okay? On the one hand, we have actual policies that are adopted across the world, things like the Common European Framework of Reference, which I'm going to talk about in a second, so this is a policy which is sort of, has traveled around the globe and has really sort of been interpreted in very, very different ways, has sort of been implemented in many, many different contexts, another kind of thing that sort of has got globalized are tests like IELTS, or like TOEIC, which are taken and used across the world, which are, I think, also understood quite differently across the world. That is, a whole other kind of discussion, but I think there is a kind of very often a different use of these tests, And there is also things like textbooks, like Headway, okay? These are texts that have a big role in language policy. They determine very often, more and more, I would say, in recent years, what we actually do when we teach English, They are very often, the main thing that we follow, more than, CFR, for example, right? Probably what the activities that there are in Headway sort of determine what we do, So these are kind of, sort of different things through which policy can sort of be globalized, right? And just thinking, right, like, you hold Headway in your hand, right? And in that moment, you are kind of, connected to this globalization in some way, That is kind of, a couple of things to keep in mind, So how has this happened in Thailand, with reference to the Common European Framework, or CFR, in particular, John, I'm going to get to your question. I see your hand up. I'm going to get to your question just when I get to the end of this bit. Okay. Just to the CFR. Okay. So this is a document which has been used in sort of various contexts for the last sort of about 20 years since it was published. And 2014. We get is the sort of beginning of adoption of CFR in Thailand. This is when the Ministry of Education sort of announced that, okay, Thailand is now going to adopt this this sort of global document, which, if you don't know what it does, it's sort of supposed to be like a common basis for decision making, for planning, It gives you those familiar 6 levels, so A1, 2, B1 and 2, and C1 and 2, and it gives you all kinds of descriptions, that you can use to, do stuff like set teaching objectives, decide, design materials, design tests, all kind of different things, So 2014, right? We get the Ministry of Education saying, okay, CFR is going to be adopted, and very soon after, a couple of books that look like this are published. Yeah, so these are a kind of teacher manual introducing teachers to the CFR, and they are, I think, today, like from what I've heard, a little bit forgotten. Yeah, but basically they were the first sort of introduction of the framework to teachers in the Thai context, and they sort of explain what it is and give kind of a translation of it and all kind of resources that could be useful to implement it. Yeah. More significantly, so something that I did a little bit of research on was how this framework started to be used by for setting goals in policy, yeah, for setting sort of long-term goals, 30-year goals in this document that you can see here, which is like a national education strategy or plan. Yeah. So in this one, okay, just to show you like one little thing that you can find here, okay, at some point is very explicitly making reference to the CFR, to the CFR levels, right? So it's sort of saying that, okay, this is, you know, what Thai students can achieve now, right? And then it kind of sets targets for the next, you know, in 5-year periods for the next, 20 years, not 30 years, for the next 20 years, yeah? And, you know, it basically says, okay, now, you know, at the end of, I think this primary school, you know, we are 8-1, so kind of, you know, very, very basic level, right? And that is gradually going to go up, yeah? That is, I think, the key sort of message, yeah, that, you know, by 20 years from now, we are going, you know, progressively up, learning more and more English, learning to do more with English, kind of at a very fast pace, I think. Yeah. The thing that I want you to sort of see here is what is right next to CFR here, yeah, which is the same kind of goals in terms of PISA scores. Okay, if you don't know what PISA is a kind of measurement of different things, of skills in mathematics, but also critical reading, critical literacy, yeah, which is basically sort of administered globally by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, yeah. It is one of the key measurements of educational success, yeah. Whether, you know, it's justified or not that it has that kind of significance, that is how it's generally seen, yeah. That, you know, when we talk about, okay, which countries have the best education, you know, Singapore, Finland, PISA is what those rankings very often refer to, yeah. Those are the countries where they have the highest kind of achievement. It's something that is very much kind of part of popular awareness in education, yeah, that, okay, Finland has the best education and stuff like that, yeah. It's something that many people are aware of, yeah. It's something that tends to be cited in the media, for example, yeah. Interesting thing, yeah, if you think about the comparison or the sort of the link that's being made with these two, right? We're gonna go up in PISA, right? If you cannot read the Thai numbers, yeah, the main thing is that, you know, they are going up, yeah. And we're gonna go up in English as measured by CFR, yeah. So definitely we're seeing kind of similar interpretation of these two, right?
Bluetooth mode.
So this is quite different. These are quite interesting sort of similarities here, yeah. Sort of future goals, right, being set through the CFR. Now, if you know CFR, it is really kind of was not really built to do this, yeah. CFR was more built as a kind of tool for teachers, yeah. It's not supposed to be a kind of, you know, policy evaluation framework or measurement of, you know, the development of the whole education system, yeah. But we can see here, this is a particular type of interpretation, yeah, that we can see based on from kind of the Thai perspective, yeah. Now, is this unique to Thailand? Not at all. In my research, I also looked at policies in Malaysia and found very similar kind of patterns, yeah. Here we can see, for example, a little passage from also a kind of education strategy in the Malaysian context, yeah, where we also see a kind of setting of future goals, right? A kind of, view of the CFR levels, right? So here we have mention of B1 and B2, right? As a kind of, measurement of development. So you see here it says, okay, Malaysia now, when we compare the scores, right, of Cambridge tests, we are ahead of kind of other ASEAN countries, right? Here we have this sort of regional competition, right? But we are behind a country like Brazil, and especially we are behind European countries, yeah? Here again, we get this kind of like, who is the best, yeah? And we can see here very, very kind of notably at the end, right? We have to move up a level if we're to take our place among the advanced nations of the world, yeah? So here we're very much seeing this view of like, okay, more English is development. More English means that we're going up in the world, yeah? Our nation is sort of climbing up the ladder in some way, yeah? And CFR is kind of how we can see that, yeah? CFR is almost a tool that is going to help us achieve that, yeah? So here, if we're going to sort of, talk about an ideology, right? We can talk about this is an ideology of nation, but it's especially an ideology of development, yeah? It's an ideology which is really sort of positioning national development as a sort of central goal, yeah? Some people that you might find using the term developmentalism, yeah? This focus on developing the nation, focus on pushing the nation as a whole forward, yeah, up kind of the sort of up the rankings, competing with others, yeah. An interesting thing here, right? This is very much seen as English is very much seen as a crucial part of this development, yeah. So we have Thai in Thai context as the national language. In Malaysia, it's Bahasa Malaysia, yeah. And English as the international language, yeah. Other languages are kind of pushed to the sideline in this way, yeah. Whether they are, and this is true of the Thai policies I looked at a couple of years ago now, yeah. So apologies that things have changed. But also the Malaysian policies, yeah. The Malaysian policies very much set. We have Bahasa Malaysia, national language, English as the international language, and then there are all the others in a kind of third sort of category, including, Chinese and Tamil, which are very much kind of important locally, yeah. They are sort of there at the bottom. And, from a Thai perspective, including Malay, for example, yeah, which is very much seen as a kind of less important language in terms of development, yeah. And as I mentioned, right, so here we've got CFR sort of seen as a kind of measurement of English proficiency, a kind of standard of development, right? Our nation, our kind of students achieve a higher sort of standard of English as measured or as kind of as measured based on the CFR, yeah, means we are more developed, yeah. That is kind of, so it's very much connecting CFR to PISA and also other global frameworks. Yeah, we have a lot of these really circulating around, think about all those indices of development and happiness and what else is there, sustainability, all of these kind of livability, all of these kind of rankings that there are. CFR is kind of being pushed into that kind of class of things, yeah, class of what we call audit culture, okay, but it's not important to know right now, yeah. So here we have a kind of pretty clear tension with some of the current thought in linguistics, right? If we think about those things before, we're talking about, placing value on all kinds of varieties, all kinds of languages, all kinds of things that we can use to make meaning, right? Here, what we're seeing is a part of the linguistic repertoire sort of being given very high value, right? National language, international language, yeah. Other things kind of pushed to the side, kind of devalued, yeah. And of course, this is a kind of global phenomenon, yeah. I mean, this is certainly not to blame these two countries in particular, yeah. Is a pattern that we can see. just thinking to global Englishes for a second, yeah, of course, yeah. When CFR is invoked in this way, yeah, CFR is also kind of seen to represent, traditional one norm of English, yeah, which is, a whole other discussion whether it does or does not represent that. But I think in these measurements we can, or in these this kind of discourse, we can definitely assume that when they say, this standard of English according to CFR, that sort of native speaker norm is somehow implied there. Yeah. Thinking about the fact that what is being invoked are things like Cambridge assessment, yeah, and those kind of things, which are very much connected to that native speaker norm. Yeah. Just another aspect of CFR, yeah. I was talking before about textbooks, yeah, as a kind of language policy, a force in language policy, yeah. It's also kind of, I think, interesting to look at, the connection between these things. So if you look at, for example, how CFR tends to be very prominent in textbook these days, yeah. We have all of these kind of on the cover of the textbooks, right? We have like, connections between, this is from passages, for example, yeah, where we can connect, okay, between one series and another series, right? And we can connect between the book and the tests and stuff like that, right? So okay, you do the passages level 1. So this is about if you're gonna get 5.5, 6, or 6.5 in IELTS, yeah. That is kind of these are the kind of connections that are very common, very often to see here, yeah. So here I think we're sort of, if we compare to the previous one, right? Here I think we're getting to a different sort of way of seeing CFR, yeah. Before it was very much, right, we're measuring the success of the nation, right? We're sort of trying to build up the nation in some way, right? Here seems to be something else, yeah. I got another example. This is, Cambridge, so this is kind of very global textbook, yeah. Another example, much more local, yeah. This is some books that I happened to see at Thai TESOL a couple of years ago, yeah. CFR Playground, yeah, where CFR is really like a brand, yeah. Also Can Do English, yeah. So this is a company which probably very cleverly, yeah, observe, okay, the ministry said we're going to use this CFR thing, yeah, let's, come up with some learning materials where we make it very clear that, okay, this is CFR learning material, yeah. This is, okay, different level, yeah, but really it's doing a similar thing to the Cambridge, to that Cambridge book, right? It's bringing in the CFR to sell, yeah. It's a brand name here, yeah. It's part of how, these textbooks are sold to us, yeah. So here we can probably identify a somewhat different ideology, right? Connected to English, yeah. Very, very clearly connected to English, which is, we can call it ideology of marketization, yeah. Very common term that you will find nowadays in neoliberalism, yeah. So this is an ideology where language is very much seen through a kind of economic, in terms of its economic value, right? In terms of, what we can do with it in economic transactions, right? So on the one hand, it's like a commodity which can be bought and sold, right? Like, for example, in educational products, right? So here marketization means, okay, that we're kind of making language, something that, is sellable as a skill, right? I'm going to sell you, right, this sort of learning opportunity, okay? And of course, connected to this is, of course, the valuation of people on the market, right? So, this person is more valuable because they have more of this language, yeah? And English is definitely part of that, yeah? CFR is also very much part of this, yeah? I mean, one of the original intentions behind it really was to sort of facilitate this kind of marketization, yeah? So this, CFR emerged really with the with sort of political and economic integration in Europe, right? That's why we need this kind of thing. It's basically to make it easier to hire people across sort of different nations, right? So this sort of market aspect has been there from the very beginning. Yeah. And here, if we compare to the ideology of development, there is very clear connection, I think, yeah, which is that we have different value placed on different parts of the linguistic repertoire. Yeah. English with marketization is always super valuable. Yeah. The most sort of valuable, both in terms of global market, right? If you want to go work somewhere else, but also locally. Yeah. I mean, nowadays within Thailand, right, for many jobs, English certificate, which would be at this level or that level, right, is very valuable, would put you in a quite decent advantage for a lot of jobs. Yeah. The key difference here, I think, is marketization, neoliberalism tends to be a lot more about the individuals. Yeah. Not so much the nation as a whole. Yeah. Development is kind of very much seen as, okay, we must push the whole community, right? Marketization is really more individualized. Yeah, it's really more about like Kristof competing with someone else. Yeah, it's really more kind of like my obligation to improve myself by learning English. Yeah, which is kind of this really kind of is a kind of individualist sort of system of values. Yeah. So two kind of ideologies I think that we can see here, yeah, sort of market ideology and then the kind of this development ideology, which I think these two in some way are kind of fighting against each other, yeah, to some extent. Yeah, they have what they have in common is they both want more English, yeah, but one is more focused on the development of the nation as a whole, the advancement of the nation as a whole. The other one really more about the sort of advancement of individuals. Yeah. All right. I hope that this was clear so far. Yeah, I've got another segment, but let me stop again and see whether there are any questions. We had a hand up before by sorry, I'm looking now. Who was it? Does anyone have any questions at this point? Anyone? Nothing in the chat? Okay. Okay. All right. Hopefully it's because it's so clear and not because it's so unclear. Yeah. This is what I'm this is what I'm hoping from over here. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Okay, this is an interesting question from I guess the chair, yeah, asking about the connection between sort of native speaker culture and language learning, yeah. So the sort of the person is sort of saying that if learning Western culture is prohibited, learning the language becomes more challenging. Well, this is an interesting one, right? Because of course, if we're talking about English specifically, Western culture is one thing that could make it relevant to the learners, yeah. But it depends on whether there is another culture that makes it more relevant, yeah. I think that's the question there, yeah. If it's not Western culture, there could be another culture that might give that meaning to the language, yeah. Definitely learning language without culture is an issue, yeah. Which cultures they have to be, that's another debate, yeah. But there certainly may be, we could learn English based on Singaporean and Malaysian culture, yeah, without ever talking about British and American culture, yeah. I think that's definitely a possibility. It would have to be quite a creative class, yeah, but definitely could be a way to go, yeah. But then it depends again, what do the learners bring in, yeah. I think that's the other side of it, yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah. Okay. All right, I'll go on then. Yeah. So this first one, yeah, I wanted to really focus on the policy side of it. Okay. So really kind of to sort of summarize that a little bit, right? So this is about how we interpret sort of these new policy trends that come in. Yeah. What kind of meanings do they acquire? Yeah. Certainly with that, with the CFR, I think we can see probably a kind of conventional sort of ideology around language in the Thai context, which is this ideology of development, yeah, in contact with this sort of market ideology, which is a little bit more sort of external, yeah. I think these are kind of sort of where we're seeing kind of two sources of sort of cultural influence kind of in contact here, yeah. Okay, now what I wanted to talk about for the second in the second kind of area, yeah, is the connection between globalization and the teaching profession, yeah. And here is really sort of, thinking about, I think this kind of sometimes we don't appreciate this, but just how huge this professional field of English language teaching or TESOL or TEFL, however you want to call it, right? How huge this field is. It is like a mega field, yeah, which has so many layers, right? We have those, huge academic conferences in USA and Europe and that kind of thing. We have kind of, and then we go all the way down to, each of our kind of local classrooms, right? Down to, a local classroom in a primary school in, the border province of Thailand, for example, right? All of that is English language teaching, yeah. So that's one thing, and it's something that I think defines this field in sort of recently, and something that is a part of globalization is migration, yeah, movement of people across borders, yeah. The fact that nowadays someone like me, yeah, can go live, somewhere else, yeah. Something that, in the past would have been extremely difficult, yeah, inaccessible to a lot of people, yeah. Nowadays we have a lot more sort of we have a lot more chances to be mobile, yeah, to move across borders. And in language teaching, yeah, this has had a huge impact. Okay, nowadays there is huge numbers of people teaching outside their native countries, yeah. In Thailand, I think this is particularly sort of visible, yeah. If we look at the Ministry of Education, the number that I could find is that there are about 11,200 foreign teachers, as they are called in Thailand schools, yeah. Now this number is already kind of limited in the sense that it doesn't include someone like me working at a university, yeah. It doesn't include people who also probably work at private language schools, people sort of working at all kind of ways, people who are teaching without a visa, right, teaching illegally, students who are teaching illegally. I mean, it happens, right? So the total might really be more like 15 or 20,000, yeah. At some point in 2015 there was also this estimate, a kind of educated or uneducated guess of 30 to 50,000, yeah, which is a huge number, which I'm not 100% sure about, yeah. But somewhere in there, yeah, is the number, right? And of course within this we have all kinds of nationalities, all kinds of backgrounds, yeah. We have, comparing to other Asian nations, Thailand has always had a lot less restriction on nationalities that can come in to teach English. Yes, places like Korea and Japan in the past have been a lot more restrictive. You really have to be British, American, Canadian to teach English there. Thailand has always been a lot more open in that regard. Yeah, so there really are a huge number of nationalities from all continents that are in this number. Yeah. Yeah. So obviously here, right, the question that we can ask, right, is like, who gets to participate in this movement? Yeah, who gets to sort of join the teaching profession? Yeah, or who gets to you know, move from one place to another, you know, be a teacher in one country and then become a teacher in another country, right? So here we're talking about some kind of selectivity, yeah, some kind of what we can call gatekeeping practices, right? If we're talking about ideology. Now, of course, the ideal principles, right? If we think in terms of global Englishes, translanguaging, right? We would have a kind of meritocracy, right? The people who are the best get to the top, yeah? So a teacher's qualifications, a teacher's experience, their professional ethics, yeah, they are the main thing that counts, not their passport, yeah. Especially from a translanguaging perspective, right? A teacher's multilingualism is an asset, yeah, whether or not they share the student's first language or not, yeah. So whether, you know, a teacher who is multilingual would count more than a teacher who is monolingual, yeah. A teacher who is proficient in English, yeah, again, ideally, right, can be a good model for students if they speak a traditional variety, so one of the native speaker varieties of English, or any other type of English, yeah. The key in this ideal world, the key would be proficiency, right? Does this happen in reality? Well, based on my research, definitely not, yeah. Here is the sad reality that I have observed, for example, yeah. Here is just 3 things that I found very quickly now, but very much in line with the research that I've done, yeah. These kind of nice advertisements, which I have anonymized, yeah, to kind of, you know, not to point to like one particular kind of employer, yeah, because this is really based on the research that I've been doing, a general pattern in recruitment in ELT in Thailand, yeah, that we have, for example, positions advertised as native speaker only, right, with salary here is 37,000 baht, right, and we have a position advertised as non-native Asian, which is 23,000 baht, yeah. These are just examples, but I can say with confidence that this is a widespread pattern in how employers value different teachers, yeah. So if we think about it, right, no question of qualifications, no discussion of experience, no discussion of professional ethics at all, right? We have the passport that you have because native speaker or not in this context is established through the passport, yeah, not through, you know, your personal history or anything like that, yeah. And that's it, yeah. And then the other thing is the European versus the Asian, yeah. That is another sort of aspect that I'll get to in a second, yeah. One thing to maybe point out here, yeah, is if you look at the level and the subject, right, we have English, and then we have health, math, and English, yeah. So higher level of qualification, right? Because to teach math in English, yeah, you really need to have a qualification in math plus proficiency in English, right? Much lower salary, yeah. So this is the sad reality that in the research that I've done, which is looked at these kind of advertisements in online spaces, yeah. That is really systematic, is really a systematic issue in the Thai context, yeah. So we can see, right, that little attention to things like background, qualifications, all of these kind of things, yeah. Primarily attention to where are you from, what kind of passport do you have. So here, of course, the ideology is, we can say, nativeness, native speakerness, however we want to define it, yeah, is basically this disproportionate valuation of native speakers, Yeah. Now here is again another area where we have a kind of tension. Yeah. A concept like native speaker, which has received huge critique in linguistics. Yeah. Which is really misused. Yeah. In so many cases. Yeah. But remains, when it comes to recruitment, a common preference. Yeah. And again, I don't want you to think that this is just a Thai issue. Yeah. We see very much the same kind of valuation in a lot of European countries, yeah, where they will basically say, you know, university lecturer, PhD must be native speaker, yeah. That continues to be the reality, yeah. Why is this an issue? Why is this valuation an issue, yeah? Well, looking at the research, okay, we definitely know that acquiring a language in early youth, right, during this so-called critical period, can make a difference in some aspects, right? Certainly pronunciation, some aspects of morphology, these kind of things do seem to be kind of determined by that, yeah? But it does not determine proficiency, yeah? The fact that, you know, someone can write an academic article is not because they were born in a particular country, yeah? Is because they learned to do that through their life, yeah? And they learned to be good at that, you know, in their 30s and 40s, maybe, yeah. So it is, you know, lifelong learning, yeah, to be proficient in a language, yeah. From a global English's perspective, of course, I already mentioned before that the whole view of native speakers as a kind of as the sole learning model is misguided, yeah. That we are in a time where really norms have sort of move beyond that idea of, you know, just one model, yeah. I would probably argue that it's also unrealistic as a learning goal, yeah. It's unrealistic to expect, you know, that I'm going to start learning at, you know, later, right? I'm going to learn in the classroom with limited exposure, right? And I'm going to arrive at this type of language, yeah. Not level of proficiency, but this type of language, yeah. We got to remember that first language acquisition, right, happens because of large amounts of exposure in early youth, yeah, not 1 hour or 2 hours a week, but continuous exposure and continuous interaction, yeah. You know, that's for foreign language learning, yeah, is very problematic if seen as a learning goal, yeah. And of course, from a translanguaging perspective, right, if we're talking about, you know, unitary linguistic repertoire, right, where all the parts are valuable, right, valuing native speakers more highly because they are supposed to have, you know, one little bit of that repertoire is problematic, considering that all these other teachers, right, all the rest of the world, right, have something that very often, not all, but that many native speakers don't have, yeah. So these are kind of, you know, clearly sort of problem issues, yeah, that, you know, where we have a kind of tension, right? Something that, unfortunately, you know, these are sort of very clear fallacies from a linguistic perspective that haven't kind of come through. The other thing that I really need to mention here, yeah, is that there is also a racial ideology behind this, yeah. Native speaker is supposed to refer very technically to a particular kind of pattern of language acquisition, right? But it's also kind of clear that very often it has some kind of racial connotation, yeah, meaning that native speaker is a Farah, yeah. You know, and actually in the research that I did, it was very common to see these kind of to see it very clearly that when people said, you know, when someone wrote an advertisement saying, you know, we want a native speaker, yeah, a native speaker only for this position, yeah, there were often these kind of workarounds. So it would say native speaker or European, yeah, native speaker or South African, yeah. And then sometimes it would just explicitly say no Asian, no African, yeah. Here, very clearly, we are dealing with a racial ideology, right? When we say native speaker, we mean white guy, Yeah, Farang, if you are, that is what Farang means if you are not Thai. Yeah. So this is, of course, highly problematic for a variety of reasons. Yeah, just factually, right? Not all native speakers are white. In fact, one of the key things I think that you will immediately observe if you ever travel to one of the native speaker countries, right? You will see all kind of different racial backgrounds, right? All kind of different skin colors. Yeah, you will see a lot of diversity. Yeah. On the other side, of course, is that not all white people are native speakers. Yeah. So just because you're white doesn't mean that you have some automatic advantage when it comes to English. Yeah. And of course, the most sort of the one that I hope that we all kind of can agree on, yeah, is that a teacher's skin color has nothing to do with their effectiveness. Yeah. Which in the end, is what these come down to. Yeah. Is this idea of native speaker is going to teach me or teach my child better. Yeah. And this is very clearly a pattern when it comes to recruitment practices that I did, that when I looked at these. Yeah. Another ideology, and here I'm drawing on MA thesis, very nice MA thesis written by my ex-student 𝗪𝗡𝗎𝗬𝗢𝗍. Yeah. Who what he did was he analyzed the perspectives of kind of Thais of different kind of groups. Yeah, so he went to a couple of schools and he talked to students, he talked to parents, and he talked to the Thai teachers working at the schools, and he asked them, what do you think about who should be your teacher, right? What do you think about native speaker teachers, non-native speaker teachers? What is your kind of judgment about them? Yeah. And there were all kind of different views. It was definitely not 100% negative toward non-native speakers. Yeah, there were actually quite a lot of sort of there was a lot of ambivalence in these views. Yeah, there were a lot of cases where people said, well, I like this one, but actually I feel like I should learn with that one. Yeah, there were a lot of that kind of there was a lot of that kind of sort of split belief, yeah, or split sort of attitude. But what this seemed to indicate also was that there was quite a clear link between this question of nativeness and the question of race, and somehow a kind of ideology of social class or social status. Yeah. The question, for example, here you get the first extract from one of the students saying, I think both native and non-native speakers are good, but I chose native speakers because if I learn English with them for a long time, I may pick up their accent, yeah, and their style of speaking, which is better, yeah. So this kind of valuation is very much connected to, kind of a hope for your own language learning, yeah. And this was very much seen as a kind of big thing. There is this, to me, kind of very sad extract here from one of the parents, yeah, who basically, she said, my daughter had a Filipino teacher and she didn't win the English storytelling competition because her accent was the same as the Filipino teacher. Yeah, she lost to a student who was learning English with native speakers. Yeah, so here, okay, with language acquisition, we can critique this. Yeah, but if we look at the belief, right, we're seeing here kind of a kind of fear, right? Fear of missing out in some way. Yeah. If I don't try to learn with that one, it will be a kind of like, it will diminish my opportunities later in life. Yeah. This is an extremely kind of powerful belief in education in general. Yeah. Parents investing huge amount of money all over the world, right? With this sort of, with the best opportunity of their child in mind. Yeah. And very clearly we can see a kind of connection here to, opportunity to learn with native speakers. Yeah. The situation at these schools, the schools that Luke did this research in, were actually quite good schools. Yeah. They were 3 pretty decent schools around sort of the Songkla province. Yeah. certainly you wouldn't say, you know, kind of poor schools or low class or anything like that. Yeah. But basically, what he found or what he saw at these schools was a kind of this widespread fear of missing out, yeah, which you can also kind of see in this last extract from one of the teachers at these schools, right, who is really talking about how, you know, they cannot afford to hire native speakers, yeah. They are kind of, you know, they are at the bottom of the market because, you know, 35,000 is a pretty good salary. It's more than I earned when I started with my PhD, just as an idea, yeah. But it is seen basically what they can offer, yeah, is less than that, is below the market price, yeah. So here we're definitely seeing kind of this connection to status, right? Feeling that, oh, like I'm missing out on a chance to go kind of higher up in society, yeah. And of course, if we look at what are the schools where this kind of access is possible, yeah, international schools, yeah, which, you know, one of the reasons why they can charge so much is they promise, or they show very proudly all the pictures of Farang only, native speaker only, yeah. You know, that is very much also connected to this to nativeness and to race, yeah. That's that social status, social class ideology, right? A sign of wealth, yeah, a sign of distinction, I'm part of the social elite, is I have a Farang teacher, yeah. That is what seems to come out of some of this data, yeah. So this is kind of just to bring together, right? Hopefully what I can kind of get you to see here is kind of English really as at a kind of nexus of different ideologies, yeah. That's the way to see it if we're thinking about English and ideology, right? As all of these different sort of belief systems intersecting around this one, around, you know, English, yeah. In some cases, these are sort of, you know, they tend to kind of go in the same direction, yeah. In some cases, they might be sort of opposed, yeah, certainly with, you know, the marketization and that kind of individual focus versus the collective focus of development. There we have kind of contrasting beliefs, yeah, and there, you know, we have a kind of struggle going on, or kind of, you know, maybe there has to be some kind of negotiation between those, yeah. Okay, I hope that that's kind of yeah, it's a lot of information, yeah. Maybe just to kind of, as a sort of point to finish on, okay, I was thinking, you know, what is kind of our job in relation to this? And I'm going to assume that most of us here are either, we would say we are applied linguists or sociolinguists, or we are teachers, yeah, or at the very least we are speakers of English, which are highly proficient, yeah. If we weren't highly proficient, we wouldn't be here, yeah. As applied linguists, okay, I think our duty is to research, to understand, uncover, and also to resist ideologies, yeah. You know, we are here, we should be critical applied linguists and critical sociolinguists, yeah, meaning sensitive to issues of power, yeah, and finding ways to you know, to fight for the greater good, yeah. We got to remember that all of these ideologies, yeah, tend to empower someone, but they mainly serve to disempower, yeah. The losers in all of these ideologies that I mentioned today, yeah, are a much bigger number than the winners, yeah. Our job as scholars, I think, is to find ways that we can empower everyone, but more people at the very least, yeah. The way that we can kind of bring a lot more sort of validate a lot more people in teaching and learning, yeah. As teachers of English, I think also we have a hugely important role, yeah. I mean, we have to try and develop practices which move beyond these ideologies, yeah. And we are, I think, also you know, as scholars in the Thai context, a lot of us are very lucky that we're also involved in language teaching, yeah. I mean, they are not, you know, I just compare myself to other sociolinguists around the world. There are not many people who actually also teach language at the same time as doing sociolinguistic research, yeah. So we do have an opportunity in the sense that we are quite closely connected to practices, even if we're working at universities. Yeah. And our duty is to try and develop practices which move beyond these ideologies, because of course we serve our students better in that way. Yeah. Here I think really, not to disappoint anyone, but really here, I think as teachers, we really cannot focus anymore only on just the technical aspects of learning a language. Yeah. We can't just teach vocabulary and just teach grammar and pronunciation and these kind of things. Yeah. When we teach language, we are engaging in a social activity. Yeah. We are teaching a social resource. We're not teaching how to put together a machine. Yeah. We are teaching how to, exist in society. And part of that is we've got to sort of think about what kind of ideologies there are in our teaching. And of course, as speakers of English, we also have a duty to promote positive, inclusive values. Yeah. To not make fun of people, for example, when their English is not sort of, doesn't conform to the traditional norm, because in the end, if they are using English, however broken it might be in the conventional sense, they are part of global Englishes. Yeah. I think that is kind of also our duty as kind of proficient speakers to sort of make that happen. Okay. So that is kind of, the sort of, to finish on, yeah, is our homework. Yeah. What we all have to do, I think, as sort of positive members of society. Yeah. All right. I'm gonna finish there. Okay. I think it's enough by now. Yeah.